one who had failed in a preliminary stage would take birth in an opulent family. One who had failed at an advanced stage would take birth in a devotee family. One who succeeded by meditating on the Paramatma would get Paramatma meditation. And the highest form, which was summarized in the verse, Yogi Nam Api Sarvesham, is the one who succeeded by meditating on Krishna, which actually is the segue into the 7th chapter. Then how does Astanga Yoga relate to Jnana and Karma? So through Karma one purifies one's urges. So one learns to control the urges. Through Jnana one learns to control the senses. So these are the two prerequisites. So a person who has not learned to control their urges, so urges is desires to perform sinful activities, and controlling of the senses is acting on the platform of the soul, knowing that you are not the body. So successively increasing level of purification, because in Astanga Yoga the purification is that of the mind. So what were the 8 stages in Astanga Yoga? So we had come up with this mnemonic, that why nap? Please definitely do something. So this is Yam Niyam, Asan, Pranayam, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyan and Samadhi. The first 4, the Yam, Niyam, Asan and Pranayam, these are considered to be the preliminary stages of Astanga Yoga, which mostly deal with making your body healthy and making it free of material discomforts. Because the later part, which is Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyan, Samadhi, involved sitting in meditation for very, very long time, thousands of years. So if at that time one is troubled by bodily discomfort, the person will not be able to meditate. And generally, of course, people consider yoga to be the 3rd and 4th, which is asana and pranayam. But Prabhupada would say that without yam and niyam, which is without following the do's and the don'ts, and even before one follows the do's and the don'ts, we just saw that one has to have control on the urges and the senses. One has to be purified by performing karma and reach all the state till all the way till Nishkam karma, before the person becomes qualified to even do the yams and niyams of Astanga Yoga. So what is the focus in the initial age? In the initial stages, the focus is on developing neutrality. And we had seen that there were 3 kinds of neutrality. To things, which is neutrality to whether it is a stone or a gold. Neutrality to people, whether it's a Brahman or a Chandal or an animal. And then neutrality to situations of honor and dishonor, respect or disrespect, fame or infamy. And the focus in the advanced stage is on Paramatma or Krishna. So Pratyahara is the stage where the focus changes from external to internal. So once a person establishes the focus, then Dharana, Dhyan and Samadhi are stages of increased meditation. Biggest challenge in yoga practice, this was controlling the mind. Arjun says that mind is like the wind, and Krishna agrees. Difficult to control the mind, abhyasena, savairagyena. And he says with practice and detachment. So many lifetimes of practice and detachment. Summarize of the flow, we'll do that after this, and 647 has been already done. So quick summary that in the 6th chapter, Krishna started off by saying that when one is sufficiently purified by Nishkam karma, then they can actually give up karma. So far Krishna was saying that don't give up karma, do it, do it, do it. But when one is, after many years or lifetimes of practice of Nishkam karma, when the person is firmly situated at the platform of the soul, that Aham Brahmasmi, that I am the soul, then the person can give up the karma and practice Ashtanga Yoga. And this requires the control of the urges, the sense control, and the process is one that develops mind control. So because the earlier part of the Ashtanga Yoga is active engagement, the part of Yam, Niyam, Asana and Pranayam, it is included in the karma section of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna does not speak really that much of advanced yogi, other than the fact that it's a difficult stage to reach. The latter part is samadhi, which is becoming one in meditation. And the process is very long and the chances of fall down are very high. So Arjun perceives it, Krishna confirms it, and that's why they talk about the destination of the yogis that have fallen at various stages. And the chapter concludes with Krishna saying that perfection of yoga is to be connected to Krishna. Okay, so the verse we did. Okay, so now we begin with our second section of the Bhagavad Gita, chapters 7 to 12. So let's go over the titles of the chapter and the mnemonic. So chapter 7 is knowledge of the Absolute, which we will be doing today. Chapter 8 is attaining the Supreme. 9 is the most confidential knowledge. 10 is the opulence of the Absolute. 11 is the universal form. And 12 is devotional service. So these are the 6 chapters in the Bhakti section of the Bhagavad Gita. So this is a mnemonic for these 6 chapters. So let's start with the 7th chapter, knowledge of the Absolute. So one thing that you'll notice in these all these chapters, 6 middle chapters, that they are very different from the first 6 chapters. The information is, it flows very easily. So I remember some of you were sharing that we seem to get it but don't get it. We seem to understand in bits and pieces but not the big picture. And that's because karma is complicated. It's not entirely our own shortcoming. The subject of karma is complicated. Krishna simplifies it as much as he can, but the subject is intrinsically complicated. We'll see the same thing happening in the last 6 chapters, which are dealing with Gyan, which is again a complicated topic. But Bhakti, by contrast, it flows very, very smoothly. So, conversation so far, and the reason I repeat it, just for repetition, for emphasis, because as I mentioned, that understanding the flow is probably the most important takeaway in our understanding the Bhagavad Gita. So the Bhagavad Gita began with Arjuna refusing to fight, giving reasons not to fight. Krishna instructs Arjuna to fight, and he gives 3 categories of information to Arjuna. First is Sankhya, which is that you are the soul and not the body. Second, he says you perform your prescribed duty. That's the greatest protection against sins. And finally, he says best is to perform your activities with the knowledge that you are the soul. So he talks about Sankhya, Karma and Buddhi Yoga, which is the same thing as Nishkam Karma. The best thing is to act without any desires. Arjuna expresses confusion between Karma and Gyan. And then Krishna says that one should act as per one's level of purification or adhikar. So as long as a person is sakam, as long as a person has desires, then karma is recommended. Because through that, one gets purified. When one is purified of those desires, then the person need not act. But even then, Krishna recommends acting without desires, which is nishkam karma. So he expands on the topic of nishkam karma. And then he concludes by advising Arjun to be vigilant against vikarma, which is against sinful activities. In the 4th chapter, where there is no question by Arjun, Krishna continues to glorify Gyan. So he glorifies knowledge as one that enables one to do the right thing with the right purpose. So if one is doing karma kant or sakam karma, then one must have the knowledge of what is there in the scriptures, what is recommended and what is prohibited. And if one is progressed to the stage of nishkam karma, then one should start developing the knowledge of the soul. And through this process of karma gyan and vigyan, one matures into the stage of primarily knowledge of the self. At this point, Krishna has peripherally introduced himself, but primarily the knowledge is of the self. In the 5th chapter, we see that Arjun has still the same confusion between action and inaction. And Krishna again gives the same answer. He says that nishkam karma is superior because it purifies of your desires and protects you against fall downs also. But this time he gives a slightly more deeper understanding by talking to Arjun about the 3 doers. That any activity is done by the jiva, the soul, based on his desires, on the sanction of the Paramatma, and executed by the Swabhav or Prakriti. So in explaining these 3 doers, Krishna also introduces Arjun to Super Soul or Paramatma, which is Krishna's presence in this world. So when the jiva comes to the world, Krishna comes along with him as the Paramatma. So because the jiva is closely associating with Paramatma since time immemorial, Krishna first introduces Arjun to Paramatma. And as we just discussed, the whole process of Astanga Yoga is a process of trying to know the Paramatma. So this is where the 6th chapter ended. And Krishna ended the 6th chapter by saying that of all the yogis who are meditating on the Paramatma, those who meditate on me, Krishna Swayam Bhagwan, the basis of the Paramatma, are the best. And chapter 7 begins the section of Bhakti, where Krishna will begin to speak in greater depth about this wonderful and esoteric aspect of spiritual advancement, which is devotional service. So far, the jiva has been center stage in the Gita. It has all been about us, about our desires, our activities, our purification, our protection. So jiva has been at the center of the stage. Now Krishna will speak about himself. In these 6 chapters, Krishna will take center stage. In the last 3 chapters, Prakriti takes the center stage. So that's why we understand the 3 doers also, Jiva, Krishna and Prakriti. So we will Krishna will now introduce us to himself in greater details. So the chapter 7 is broken up into two sections. The first part is knowing Krishna, and the second part is not knowing Krishna. Krishna speaks about those who know him or aspire to know him, or those who willfully or through some other process decide not to know Krishna. So let's look at the first section, which is knowing Krishna. So the journey that Krishna has taken us through so far, right from the beginning of the second chapter, is that he introduced us to Sakam Karma, where the focus is on controlling the urges to do sinful activities. And where does that impetus come from? From faith in the Vedas. Because ultimately, it's the scriptures that tell us that what is a pious activity and what is the sinful activities. We may have some kind of a built-in moral compass, and we may be able to objectively apply it to other people. But when it comes to ourselves, it's very difficult to be objective. So that is why it is important to take shelter of the scriptures. So Sakam Karma is also called Karma Kand, where essentially a person who is full of desires but still pious. The person wants to enjoy prosperity and wealth and progeny and fame, but in a pious way. So he follows the do's and the don'ts of the scriptures. He gives in charity, does not cheat, does not do any illicit activities, and in this way he acquires his objectives. From this point, the progress is to Nishkam Karma, where the focus is not only on the urges but also on the senses. So in Nishkam Karma, the person no longer has calm, does not have desires, because he has developed faith in the notion of his identity as a soul. So when he considers himself as a soul, then everything linked to the body becomes immaterial. What is my upadhi? Am I being glorified? Do I have wealth? So he recognizes that all this is an extension of the bodily conception. So because of that, Kam gets converted to Nishkam, but he still does activities for purification. So this is the state of Atmagyan. Then Krishna took us to the stage of Astanga Yoga, where the control is not only of the urges and the senses, but also of the mind. Because it is through the agency of the mind that a yogi meditates and develops faith on Paramatma, on the Super Soul. And a person at this stage begins to develop Paramatma Gyan, the neutrality of the Super Soul. The fact that the Super Soul does not distinguish between any kinds of situation, that he is equally favorable. So all the qualities that the Super Soul has, the yogi begins to develop by meditating on the Super Soul. Now, as a side effect at this stage, because the person is meditating on the Super Soul, he not only develops the qualities of the Super Soul, he also develops the abilities of the Super Soul. So which is why the yogis are able to develop siddhis. So siddhis like anima and lagima and garima, being lighter than the lightest, being heavier than the heaviest, being able to travel at the speed of thought, being able to reach out and acquire anything that they want, being able to read the mind of others. So these are all siddhis which are considered to be the byproduct of the process of yoga. And of course, many times the yogi gets diverted by them because the siddhis also give them so-called magical powers, so they get diverted by them. But essentially, they come because of the close association with the Paramatma in the form of meditation. So after having talked about Sakam Karma, Nishkam Karma, Astang Yoga, now Krishna is beginning to talk about Bhakti Yoga. The focus in Bhakti Yoga is now control of the desires. And in a way, the control of the desires is at the next level of control after the control of urges, senses and mind. Because desires are more subtle. One can control urges simply by developing the conviction not to do sinful activities. One can control the senses by engaging them in a way that is recommended by the scriptures. But controlling of the desires is very subtle. So that is why Bhakti Yoga in the stage of advancement comes after this. But there is also a direct access to Bhakti Yoga, which means that a person can enter into the stage of Bhakti Yoga even if he is not able to control the urges, even if he is not able to control the sense and the mind and the desires. The person can still enter into the stage of Bhakti Yoga. Now, arguably such a person will take more time to make advancements, but there is no prohibition. So in Astang Yoga, a person cannot enter that stage unless he has already purified through Nishkam Karma. And in Nishkam Karma, one cannot enter the stage unless he is purified by Sakam Karma. But Bhakti Yoga, we can enter, and we will see more of this later on. So this is an important concept for us to understand because it is key to our Krishna consciousness that we practice as practicing devotees. So sometimes when we see this advancement, we might say, but we haven't done Astang Yoga. Should we be doing Bhakti Yoga? And Krishna will reveal later on, absolutely. Because for this stage, he has a special entry door. So Krishna begins with introducing himself. But let me pause over here and see if there are any comments on what we have discussed so far. So many times when we face adverse situations, the effect is actually a lot more subtle and pervasive. So let's assume that you're in a situation where somebody treats you badly, and you may be affected by it. Uh, and then over time you'll be able to talk yourself out of it. Generally what we do is we say this person, we, we move a fair amount of responsibility to the other person and distance ourselves. Situations are a lot more subtle that way, that it's difficult to discern whether the situation is happening because of the other person, because of us, because of prarabdha, and the effects are a lot more pervasive. I'm actually thinking of, and this is more from a materialistic perspective, but they talk about this notion of motivation, and so this is a lab experiment that they do, that they have two chimpanzees in a cage, and they make them do a small task, and every time they do the task, they give them something as a reward to eat, and both of them are happily doing it. As soon as they do it, they get a peanut or whatever, they eat it. And then after some time, they start giving one of the monkeys a food item that is more relishable. I forget what it was, but something that is more relishable. Now, the same food item is being given to the first monkey, but now he stops doing the work because he sees the other person is getting a better food item. So, he actually rejects the food and stops doing the work. So when I was actually seeing that it was there in one of the trainings I went, then I was thinking of this only, that situations are very a situation in which we find ourselves to be treated unfairly, to be humiliated, or to be not given our due. They actually become very, very pervasive. And being neutral to that situation, it actually involves neutrality to the other aspects also. That fine, I haven't got this increment, the other person should have gotten it. So neutrality to the object also, fine. I don't have more money, it's okay, right? Then neutrality to the person also. That okay, this person should have given me, did not give it to me. That's fine. So the more subtle the effect is, the more difficult it is for us to handle it. Okay? Are they?
So probably like it means, if somebody could achieve the neutrality to the situation, naturally we will be like achieving the neutrality to the people also. But if he is
it's a stage of progression. So yes. Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So I had a question. So now when Krishna is slowly leading us from Sakam Karma to Nishkam Karma to Ashtanga Yoga and then to Bhakti, I mean, I'm just curious, like, and Bhakti being a shortcut by itself, like it can stand on its own. It doesn't have to be led through the stages, right? So why, just curiosity, why is this leading happening? Is it because of the level of effort? Like, why is Bhakti coming at this stage? Why not even before? Because the level, like Ashtanga Yoga might be more difficult than Nishkam Karma, which is more difficult than Sakam Karma. So I can understand that leading, but I can't understand why Bhakti would come afterwards when laying out the Gita.
In terms
because
of,
it stands on its own pillar.
It does stand on its own pillar. so when we are at the stage of practicing bhakti, then we are acting at, so as you have noticed that as the progression goes on, then the level at which we are being asked to control is becoming more and more internal. Like earlier on it was actions, try to control your actions, then control your mind. Controlling the mind is a little bit more difficult than controlling action. Bhakti is actually controlling your desires, right? What is the essence of bhakti? That the perfection of bhakti is you desire nothing but service to Krishna. So at one level, unless a person has gone through several lifetimes of practicing to control the urges, the senses and the mind, it is unrealistic for the person to be able to control desires. Which is why bhakti has been placed at this stage. The reason that bhakti stands on its own is because in the first 6 chapters we don't see any help from Krishna. We are seeing instructions from him, we are getting guidance from him, but we don't see any active help from him. At the stage of bhakti, Krishna actively begins to help. Now, it does not mean that one can become an advanced devotee without controlling the urges and the senses and the mind and the desires. All that needs to happen. So everything that happens to a sakam karmi, nishkam karmi, astang yogi also happens in bhakti. But it happens through the process of interaction with Krishna. Srila Prabhupada would give this example of you're working in an organization and you have a boss, and you can get a promotion by working hard, doing everything that he asks you to do and hoping for the best. Or you can become friends with the boss. And then even if you're not working hard and even if you're not fully qualified, because the boss has affection for you, he's more likely to promote you. It does look like nepotism or it has negative connotations, of course, because it's material. But that's what bhakti is all about, is trying to attract the affection of Krishna so that all this that would need to be done in all these exhaustive stages, either he helps us do it or he empowers us to do it by ourselves. Okay, thank you. Balaka, you had some thoughts to share? Yeah, go ahead, Balaka.
Sorry, I was muted. So, answering to Piyali's question that why is it like if bhakti, if we can go directly to bhakti, why are there like we should follow all these difficult things of Nishkam Karma and Ashtanga Yoga? I think last week you mentioned people do follow these paths because that is prescribed in the scriptures, right?
These are all bona fide paths, and people do follow them. And there are examples of devotees who follow this path and then reach the stage of bhakti through these paths.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Actually, the reason why I asked, like I know in many other faiths, just for transparency, many other faiths, like you go to, not to pick on any faith, but you go to a confession box and all your bad negative karma is washed away. So, is bhakti like that? It's not, right? So when you make it stand on its own, it sounds like that. But the precursor to it, you have to have sakarma, you have to have nishkam karma to some extent, and you have to be able to control your mind. So that is what I was trying to actually say, because it's not totally independent per se. It is kind of filtered through.
It's not independent. So as I mentioned, that everything that is done in the earlier stages also needs to be done.
Okay.
In bhakti, the only difference is that the process to do that is different. So in sakam karma, we do control our urges by doing pious activities. Bhakti also, bhakti does not recommend that you do impious activities. We still do pious activities. We still control our urges. The difference is that we control our urges for the pleasure of Krishna. So same activities are done, same kind of purifications are there, but because they are being done in relation to Krishna, the return on investments is much higher. So little bit of effort, lot of purification. So it has to go through the same stages, but it goes through much more rapidly because you're directly connected to the Supreme Personality. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Prabhuji, I have a comment.
Yes, Prabhu, please go ahead.
Yeah, is the understanding correct? Just like when you were explaining, I was like going through this, that my mind that in bhakti yoga, like initially with karma yoga, nishkam karma, all in earlier yogas, right? So we don't really had support. It was just like we're just controlling, and like getting away our desire, and like we're just like we're trying to control our senses by. But when we're talking about the bhakti, we at least have someone to reach out to. So basically, you are doing for someone else rather than for yourself. So I think being in like material world, I think we tend to do more when we have to do it for someone else. Like the motivation is there from your inside that you are doing it for someone else. Like if I have to do something for my parents, I'll be like more eager to do it rather than like I can take it easy if I'm doing it just for myself, right? So my family or someone who I love. I think that's where the love part comes in, where if you are doing it for Krishna, then you kind of think about in a way like, okay, like this, I'm doing it for Krishna, so I should be like, be more like disciplined, be more this, like I should be. And then eventually I think we'll get that. That's what like my realization has been like since I joined Krishna consciousness, that when you follow the process, you automatically get those qualities, like you lose your material desire, like you like controlling your senses comes automatically rather than like you forcibly doing the trying to achieve that process.
Thank you, Prabhu. I think you summarized it better than I did. So that's essentially what the potency of the bhakti process is, that if you do it for somebody else that you love, then it becomes it just becomes a lot more joyful. And especially if that somebody else is a powerful person and can also empower you at the same time. So like a child is trying to help the father and is doing it out of affection, but Prabhupada would give this example that the child goes and he says, I'll pick this up for you, Papa, and then he goes and tries to pick a heavy weight, and behind the scene the father is holding the weight and the child is putting some effort. So that's also going on, that because there is love, the activities are a lot more pleasant, and because there is reciprocation, which is disproportionately large, the progress is very rapid. So essentially, we go through the accelerated courses in Karma Kand and Nishkam Karma and Astanga Yoga. Prabhupada would say that an advanced devotee has all the siddhis, and Prabhupada certainly had them. So we can understand that even whatever the process that Astanga Yoga gives, Bhakti also gives the same potency. Okay, so Prabhu, let me go ahead now, just to keep time on track. Thank you. Okay, so beginning with the first section of the 7th chapter, which is how to know Krishna. And Krishna, and this is actually right up front in the very first verse in the 6th chapter, that Krishna gives us 3 ways. Not 3 ways, but one way with 3 aspects to it. That he says, hear with faith and then act upon what you hear. That all 3 of them, when they are done, hand in hand, you will know me. And each one of them is very important and very relishable also. So what do you hear? Which is essentially what the middle section of the Bhagavad Gita is. That you hear about the Lord. Who is he? What does he look like? What does he like? What does he dislike? What are his potencies? Hear about his pastimes. Hear about his devotees. And hear with faith. So faith again is faith that is not blind faith, but faith that is validated by the scriptures. Typically it says by Guru Sadhu Shastra. It is validated by the scriptures, by your spiritual master, by the saintly persons. And the third perhaps is the most important. That once you hear something with faith, then you do it. So Prabhupada would have this situation with his disciples, and they would ask all these far out questions. If this, then that. If not this, then that. If this situation, then what? And Prabhupada would patiently try and answer them. But then he would notice that a lot of them were just doing that. They were just there for hearing. Even the faith component was probably weak over there. And that's why Prabhupada would mention, he would smile, but he would mention inquiry, but no practice. So practice is very important. So whatever we hear with faith, we practice upon it. And Krishna assures that we will get to know him, which is no small thing. Because, and I want to thank you all for asking all these wonderful questions, because I would not have been able to articulate things because you're talking experientially. I would not have been able to articulate it that well. That the pinnacle of achievement that bhakti directly catapults us to, the sweetness in its practice. So it is subsuming lifetimes after lifetimes of what a person in any of the other processes would need to do. But all we need to do is hear with faith and practice. So let us start hearing now from Krishna. So Krishna is now introducing himself. Who am I? So he first does it in a general way. He says, I am everything, which is fairly comprehensive. And then of course he breaks down into details that everything that is material and gross. Bhumi, Rapi, Nalo, Vayu, earth, water, fire, air, ether. So everything that we see around us is composed of these 5 elements. And he says that I am the cause of it. Then everything that is subtle, which is the mind, intelligence, and the ego, says I am the cause of it. And then everything that is spirit, aham bija pradapita, that I am I am the Pita, the seed providing father. So all that we see around us is a combination of matter and spirit. Either gross matter or subtle matter and spirit. There is nothing else. It's either gross or subtle matter and spirit. And Krishna says that I am the one who creates it, who maintains it, and who will also eventually destroy it. Of course, the spirit doesn't get destroyed, but in this connection it reflects to death, where the spirit and the body, they leave one another. So we see that when Krishna is introducing himself, he's introducing himself in terms of where we are. So even though the picture I've shown is of Krishna with a flute and a peacock feather, but he's not introducing himself as that. He's not saying, I'm in Golok Vrindavan with Srimati Radharani with cows and on the banks of the river Yamuna. But he's talking to us from where we are. So where we are is, we consider ourselves to be matter. We see matter around us, and we have a sense of spirit. There's a distinction between my body and me. So he's saying that what you see around yourself comes from me. So the first step in building faith in Krishna is that he is not taking one to esoteric heights, but he is coming down to our level and saying that you see matter around you. That is me. You perceive intelligence and mind and ego. That is me. And you have an understanding of soul that is coming from me. So after having introduced himself, then Krishna gives, so like I have been giving mnemonics, Krishna gives certain ways in which he says you can perceive me. So like he says that I am the taste of water. That when you drink water and you appreciate the taste, then you can think of me. I am the light of the sun and the moon. I am the fragrance of earth, the sound in ether, the heat and light of fire. So I am the ability in men. I am the penance of the ascetics. I am the syllable Om. I am the root cause of everything. So what is Krishna doing over here? So Krishna is saying that at this point, you are not ready to come to me, so I am coming to you. You can see me in the water that you drink. So these statements are accurate, correct, but not the complete truth. Because Krishna is the taste of water, but he's much more than the taste of water. But at this point, this is what he's telling us. And later he will tell us more, but at this point, this is what he's telling us. So we see that there is a gradual development in bhakti also. The person at this stage is a sakam bhakta. He's a materialistic devotee. He's a devotee because his focus is Krishna. But he's sakam because his preoccupation is matter. Krishna says, no worries. Your preoccupation is matter. I will come into matter. And all these things are things that are empirically observed by us. We don't have to develop jnana, or we don't have to develop meditation for this. Prabhupada would say, what is the difficulty? When you drink Krishna, when you drink water, say Hare Krishna. That will take you back to Godhead. By which he means that will start the process which will take you back to Godhead. And then Krishna says that, he gives this an analogy. He says that I'm like the thread in the pearl necklace that is holding the pearls together but can never be seen unless shown. So after Krishna says that I am this, I am in this, one may say that if you are everywhere, then why doesn't everybody see you? And he says, because I am there, but I am hidden. And he will talk more about how and why is he hidden. So, why is Krishna talking about himself? Sometimes people say that Krishna has pride, or Krishna is promoting himself. But remember, after 6 chapters of talking about us, now this is the first time Krishna has started talking about himself. And the reason he talks is that bhakti is only possible in the context of Krishna. Basically, bhakti is possible in the context of Jiva and Krishna. Jiva, he has spoken about, and Jiva is there, we know. So now, he's talking about himself. And he begins talking about himself in the relation to the material world. So Prabhupada says that the simple formula that Krishna applies is to know Krishna is to love Krishna. So one might say that isn't this Gyan that Krishna is giving us, Sambandha Gyan? Isn't it Gyan? Yes. It is Gyan with the purpose of Prema. Because if there is a person who has wonderful qualities, and as you know more and more about the wonderful qualities of the person, then you will automatically love the person. So this is the Gyan that invokes Krishna Prema. And he also talks about himself to talk about the consequences of not knowing him. That what happens if somebody goes through lives after lives not knowing him? What happens to them? So this is the end of the first section. Let me talk about the second section. The first section is knowing Krishna, and the second section is not knowing Krishna. So Krishna talks about 4 kinds of people who turn their backs to him. He talks about the materialists, the person who is so materially engrossed that he has no time for Krishna. That you go to the person and say, chant Hare Krishna, he says, I have no time. I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to go for jogging in the morning, I have to go in the evening, I have to play golf with my friends. So there's no way that I can, where do I have the time? So people who are gross materialists. Now these people, ironically, are the most innocent because they don't have any dvesh. They're just indifferent. So they don't have any envy for Krishna. They don't dislike Krishna. They just don't have time for him. So they're busy in their activities. Then you have the mental speculators. The mental speculators are those who will constantly keep speculating. So you remember we talked about hear with faith and practice. But there are people who will hear without faith, or they will hear with little bit of faith but not practice. So they become speculators. That why did Krishna do this? Why did he marry 16,000 wives? Why does he have a peacock feather on his? Why doesn't he have an ostrich feather? Why does he play the flute? Why doesn't he play the saxophone? So they will speculate, and I'm being a little frivolous, but they can speculate on on the more subtle philosophical points also. But ultimately their aim is to destroy Krishna through the process of speculation. Then there are the atheists. The atheists are the ones who want to kill Krishna, that there is no God. And atheists we are very familiar with. Basically they say that everything is engineered by the laws of nature or the laws of matter, without pausing to think that who is enacting those laws. But that's what they say. Or they say that what I can't see, I can't believe. And then those people who are actively averse to Krishna. So they are the people who will who will develop theories, who will take the shelter of various philosophical tenets and actively denounce the presence of Krishna. And then Krishna contrasts them with 4 kinds of people who actually turn towards Krishna. Now remember, he is talking about early stages of bhakti. So these are people who are very invested in the material aspect of one's existence. But the difference is that instead of turning away from Krishna, they turn towards Krishna. So there is the person who wants wealth. That, please Krishna, give me money. I need for my family, I need for a bigger house. So please give me wealth. Or a person in distress. He's like, I have health problems, or I have mental problems, or I have too many enemies. So please help me. Turn to Krishna. Or the person who is curious, that what is Krishna all about? So many people talk about Krishna. All these Hare Krishnas are chanting. So when you look at some of the memory tapes of senior devotees who came to Krishna consciousness, a lot of them came through curiosity. Saw people chanting, they were curious, and they came in and said, "What is this Hare Krishna? Who is this? Who is this Krishna?" And then there is a person who comes in knowledge. So this is the person who has gone through the stages of Sakam Karma, Nishkam Karma, Astang Yoga. That's why you see he's old. That he has gone through all these stages. Now he is mature with practice and knowledge. And he turns towards Krishna. Now Krishna glorifies this person. He says, such a person is dearest to me. Why? Because for a very, very long time he has been trying. He has been gradually improving. And then what about the other persons? He says, the other persons are also dear to me. So the point that he's making is that because they are turning to him, a person who is turning to him because of artha or artharthu or jigyasu, they are almost at the same level as the jnani, as the person who is in knowledge. That is the potency of turning towards Krishna. And here then Krishna reveals, he says that, so the question that was there in the previous slide was that if Krishna is everywhere, then why don't people see Krishna? Krishna says that because they turn their back towards me, they are covered by a curtain of Maya. Maya is bewilderment. So whatever they do, it supports their notion that I do not exist. So even the speculator who is reading lots of scriptures, we find people who have read the Bhagavad Gita. When I was in Coimbatore, one of the person who was there, he had read so many scriptures, Ramayana, Bhagavad Gita, but he had very little faith in Krishna. and I was appreciating this aspect at the time, that the same set of verses that I read with Prabhupada's purport, they were potent in developing bhakti, and he was reading it and he was getting different conclusions. So that's the power of Maya. So Maya means that which is not. It is able to show you that which does not exist. In addition to that, Krishna says that there are two more kinds of people who do not turn towards him. Those who are worshippers of demigods. So the first four category of people are not able to surrender for various reasons, either because of envy or because of misguided intelligence. But then there are some people who have the ability to surrender, but they don't surrender to Krishna. They surrender to the demigods. They worship Lord Shiva or Lord Ganesh, without knowing that even the devas are being empowered by Krishna. And the second category is the impersonalists, that those who worship the Brahman. So they are surrendering. They are surrendering to the notion of impersonal existence, but not to Krishna. And Krishna says that the persons who worship the demigod are alpamedeshas. They are less intelligent. And the person who worship the impersonal Brahman, they have no intelligence. So would anybody like to opine on why does Krishna consider the worshippers of the impersonal Brahman? So less intelligence means you have some intelligence. It's just less. But Brahman, he says that they have no intelligence. So why does he consider them to be having no intelligence?
The demigod worshippers, they have the acceptance of authority, somebody superior to them. But impersonal, yes, they want to use the, even if they worship someone, they wanted to use them to a point so that they will become that. So there is no concept of real surrender, or the humility aspect is not there.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I think people who surrender to Brahman, at some point of time they think themselves as God, or they try to merge into God. That's which is definitely is not the truth. So soul and super soul remains. Their identity remains forever. So whoever thinks that way, that they will get merged into Brahman, and that's the basic thought behind worshipping Brahman or surrendering to Brahman. So that's probably the reason why Krishna is saying that they do not have any intelligence.
Thank you, Prabhu. Bhayahari?
So, Prabhu, I think it's because after all, Krishna is very generous to his devotees. So even devas in some ways are his devotees. That's why if someone is actually worshipping the devas or serving the devas, they're indirectly serving Krishna's devotees. Maybe without the correct perception, with the wrong perception, but they're still serving as devotees. Versus when serving Brahman, there is no such devotion factor at all in that. So maybe that's why Krishna thinks that, serving, worshipping the devas is for the less intelligent who do not know the whole knowledge, versus worshipping Brahman is someone who doesn't understand anything.
Thank you. Very good. So yes, these are exactly what my thoughts were. That Krishna actually, he says exactly what Bhayahari has said, that those who worship the demigods, they actually worship me, but in an incorrect way. But still that notion of surrender is there. And when you're worshipping Brahman, then you're doing away with something that is essential to further advancement, which is you're doing away with the notion of distinctive personal existence. When you're worshipping demigods, you still are keeping that notion. I'm a person, Indra is a person, and at some point, if you're fortunate, you will understand that Indra is empowered by Krishna. So that connection becomes complete. But when you're worshipping Brahman, you're taking several steps backwards. That the perfection of worshipping Brahman is that you're denying the existence of Krishna Swayam Bhagavan. And Brahman worship is lot of effort with very little returns. So those who worship demigods with little bit of effort, Krishna says that people worship demigods because they have material desires, and with little bit of efforts, they quickly get what they want. With worship of Brahman, that is not there. There's nobody reciprocating at the other end. So, lot of effort, no reciprocation, and you are essentially blocking off your avenue for further advancement. So that's why Krishna, he scolds them more so. He says, no intelligence. Pyali, you had a question, or this is just your hand raised from the previous? No.
Previous one.
Okay, very good. Okay, so so this is the second section. So this essentially ends the chapter. The words to memorize for this: Deviya Isha Gunamai Mammaya Duratya Mameva Ye Prapadyante Maya Metam Tarantite. So you remember that line of Maya that we showed, which basically acts as a curtain for people who are averse to Krishna. So this is the verse talking about that this divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Okay, quick summarization. So as we mentioned, Krishna now begins to speak about himself, which is needed to practice bhakti. He first speaks about himself in the context of the manifest verse. He talks about those who accept him and those who reject this. And essentially, the point that we also need to take away is that all these, so Krishna has spoken about 10 people, 10 kinds of people over here. He's talking about the Naradhamas, the Maya Partha Gyanas, Asurik Bhava Ashrita. So he's talking about the mental speculators, he's talking about the atheists, he's talking about on the other side he's talking about the Artho Artharthi Jigyasur, the person who is desiring wealth, the person who is desiring freedom from distress, the person is inquisitive. All these people are within us. Many times when we see that verse, we look at the person sitting next to it and say, this person is Artho, that person is Artharthi, I am Bhakta. But Krishna, because by the time a person has reached this point of Bhagavad Gita, there is a good chance that he is a devotee, which is why he is persevering in determining what Krishna wants to speak. But a devotee who is in the initial stages has all these tendencies. They have materialistic tendencies to enjoy. They have tendencies to speculate. they have tendency, the very fact that we keep our desires separate from Krishna means that we are rejecting Krishna. Every time we take this decision, this is for me. Rampal Maharaj gives this example that every time people keep two pockets, Krishna pocket and me pocket, then we make this distinction. So it is there for us to introspect also. That the more we are on the left side of that slide, more we are covered with Maya. The more we are on the right side, the less we are covered. Now, if you were to look at it, there is actually not much difference between the people on the two sides. Right? There's one person who is inquisitive on the right side, and there's another person who is a mental speculator. But basically, they are both in the business of agitating their mind to get to something. The difference is that one person is using that to turn away from Krishna, and the other person is using that propensity to turn towards Krishna. So all those tendencies that are there within us, if we are able to align them towards Krishna, then we move from one end of the screen to another. And that is the beginning of our process of bhakti. And the perfection is to become fully connected with Krishna. So things to memorize, the two sections in chapter 7, know and not know Krishna. How to know Krishna? We hear with faith and practice. Why is bhakti most potent? Because it does not have prerequisites, and also because it purifies. 4 kinds of people who accept: the distressed, the desiring, inquisitive, and those in knowledge. 4 kinds of people who reject: the materialist, atheist, those who are averse, and mental speculators. 2 other kinds of people who reject, it's a typo, 2 other kinds of people who reject Krishna: the demigod worship and the impersonalist. And then 7:14, recitation and translation. So I'll end over here to see if we have any comments on what we have discussed so far, the later section, or any other comments.
Prabhuji, I have a question about the verses to remember. Why is I'm just trying thinking that from each chapter, why some specific verses have been mentioned, the important verses, is because of the it's summarizing the chapter, or the main context, main point from that chapter, or something which we can relate to it or something.
They do, yeah. So essentially these verses are Bhakti Shastri verses.
Okay.
So when one does Bhakti Shastri, then there are more verses, but these are subset of that because of the reasons that you said, that they either establish a strong point or they summarize the chapter. So once you remember these verses and the translation, you'll find yourself using them also. That's the potency of these verses. Like you're Natvayam Jatunashram, you're having a discussion with somebody and you say, but Krishna says that you're not the body, you're the soul. And you say Natvayam Jatunashram. So they're very powerful verses also to convey your conviction to others.
Okay. Thank you.
Hmm?
This memorization versus Prabhuji, one is Sanskrit verses. I remember, I'm remembering, I'm not everything, but generally the English translation, even with so much effort, if I remember also very quickly, it is going on because it is not the English that we speak, and it is not staying with me. So is there any...
I think practice helps. It's just a matter of memorizing. We are used to memorizing so many things. So it's just a matter of memorizing. I also have the same problem as you have, that it's not that the translation, we actually spend more time learning the Sanskrit because it's not a language that we know. So we basically learn it exactly as it is there. Because we know English, we are more comfortable with it, we take liberties with it, we try to, and that's why the translation becomes a little muddled. Generally speaking, it's also, because again, we know English, as long as you know the meaning of the verse, you're within 70-80% of the original translation, it's okay. It's fine. Balaka, you had a thought?
No, the thought, it's a question. The question is maybe from Preeti. She won't ask over here, so she keeps on asking me. I explained it to her, but I would appreciate if you can answer it, because I know that you can answer better. She was asking me what is Brahman. I briefly told her, but I think if you can just explain it to her, it'll be better.
Preeti, is that your question, or is that your mom thinking it's your question?
Oh, she asked me.
No, that's actually my question.
It is actually your question. Okay. Brahman is the impersonal aspect of Krishna. It's been described as his bodily effulgence, or the perception of Krishna. So one of the analogies that is used to understand Brahman, Prabhupada says, is that there is the king of a kingdom, and everything is happening in the name of the king. That by the order of the king, this is done, by the order of the king. So the king's presence is everywhere. The king is not present, but everything in the kingdom is being done by so to speak, under the presence of the king. So that is Brahman, the presence of Krishna everywhere, the influence of Krishna, but it lacks the person of Krishna. So that's why Brahman is called impersonal aspect of Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, thoughts? Okay. If not, then we have a volunteer for